my technique is a little spile, 7/16 inch spile, and into a tube. I buy a roll of tube for maybe 50 bucks. Into buckets, some big buckets like this one. This is about a 5-gallon bucket. Most of my buckets are smaller ones. Ideal size I've found is like 2-gallon buckets. And put the cover back on the bucket with a little weight so the wind doesn't blow it away. Other things like little random scrap flooring tiles work as well. When I collect, I usually come around with my little wagon and some 5-gallon Home Depot buckets. I'll fill up a bucket, put it on the wagon, fill up another bucket, put it on the wagon, or maybe I'll put them on the back of my pickup. I put it into these 55-gallon barrels. I have 2 food grade 55-gallon barrels, and I keep them in the shed and try to keep them cool. If it'll be a long time before I boil, you want to keep the sap cool, otherwise the sugar breaks down. So sometimes I make little sap cubes, large sap cubes, and throw them in the bucket to keep things cool until I'm ready to boil. Okay, first boil is winding down. I had 75 gallons of sap in 2 of these buckets, and I have a evaporation rate of 8 gallons per hour, so it took me, I'll do the math, 8-9 hours to get rid of the bulk of it. So I want my 75, I know I get 60 to 1 sap to syrup, and I don't want to go down to syrup or even close to it. Yeah, out here, I'll do that in the house. So I want my 75 gallons to get down to about maybe 3 or 2, and then I'll finish it in the house. So I know how much 1 inch in the pan corresponds to, so I'm down to about 2-3 gallons. So while I'm boiling out here, by the way, a couple of things I do. One is I have my little strainer, and I try to catch impurities where I can. Little scuzz foaming up, little pieces of whatnot, you know, sticks and whatever. I scoop it out once in a while, keep an eye on it. Another thing I always have handy is emergency butter. What's emergency butter for? Well, sometimes it gets little thin, fine foam. And when that starts happening, it's at risk of foaming over. And a little bit of butter, even half of that, is enough. Stir it in there to calm it down and get rid of the foam. And it doesn't affect the taste if you use just a little. In a house, when I finish in the house, that's especially important to have a little butter on hand. So my normal process is I put some sap in the bucket to start, some sap in my warming pan to start, and once this gets boiling, I'll scoop it from the warming pan into the big pan. And I do that so that because if I put cold water in the big pan, it would kill the boil. So I'd like to kind of keep adding sap gradually so the boil stays robust. Alright, so that's how I do it. So when this thing is cooled down, the fire is pretty much gone down there, I'll open my tap. I'll pour it into these stock pots through a sheet, which is my filter. And it's going to be thin enough so it goes through the sheet pretty easily. Once it's syrup grade, it's that thick, it's very hard to filter it. I don't even filter it at that stage. I just let it settle for a little while if there's anything that wants to settle out. And so that's where we are. The hard part here is if I have any fire going and I let the pan go down to empty, it singes. So there's very little fire. I'm probably pushing my luck though. And if I let it go too thin on the bottom, I could scorch the bottom. Burn, don't burn. I think I have 100 count thread sheets, which is a little more stubborn, so it doesn't want to go through so quickly. Should have got the cheaper sheets. Now I'm stuck. I'm glad the fire's pretty low. I'll rinse this out with water later. So the last time you saw me, I brought in my almost syrup from outside in the boiler. I filtered it through a t-shirt, not a very aggressive filter. And I boiled it a little bit on the stove since it was warm. But then I let it sit on the countertop for about a week and it settled. Then I decanted, I poured it off into another stock pot, and the bottom, which was the most ugly, I put into canning jars. And then what I did today, this morning, is I basically took the good stuff, and the scuzzy stuff this is all that remains, and you can see it's hardly any syrup. If I let this settle for another week or so, I might get a little bit of decent stuff. I'll pour it in coffee. I won't use it for bottling. So we have a little time this Sunday, so I decided we're going to boil down what we have here. It was just sitting in the freezer for a little bit. So all that we had so far I'm boiling down, and the way we can tell that it's going to be syrup is the boiling point goes from 212 to 219. So how to tell if it's 219? Pretty tricky. A meat thermometer won't tell you as accurately as you'd like. They seem to go in 2-degree increments. So the best thing I have is this little handy thermometer, and I don't know if you can see the temperature. It's very hard to see the temperature with any accuracy. You have to obviously look straight on, and still it's a little bit of a guessing game. So it's partly what the thermometer is telling you, and partly what the syrup looks like. And it does change a little bit as it approaches syrup. The bubbles get finer, the fuzz gets finer. Of course, I have, if it wants to boil over, I have my handy pat of butter to keep it from boiling over. But it's boiling, and it's going down. At what point am I going to say this is syrup? Okay, to legally be syrup, it has to be a certain sugar consistency. I think it's like 66% sugar. I don't know. There's a Brix level and all that. And so to legally call it syrup, I'd have to get it definitely at the right sugar consistency, and I might not always get there because I hand mine out to friends. If I go a little past syrup, then I got a little problem, which is sugar will settle down to the bottom, and it's a little harder to deal with. If you don't bottle it hot, it'll be okay. You just have to refrigerate it. But if you want to bottle it hot and keep it sterile and have it outside in room temperature until it's opened, then you've got to bottle it hot. So I always bottle mine hot, and then once it's opened, I put it in the fridge. So we're almost ready to go. Here we go. When it's ready, I and my lovely bottling assistant will pour it into this coffee urn. We'll empty it out into bottles. Put the caps on, tip them over so that the caps get hot enough to be sterile, and then we let them cool down a little bit, and then sometimes we put labels on them, which is fun. All right, I'll get back to you when we bottle.
And the first few times we did this, it seemed very stressful. And
Yeah.
so I still get stressed even though it's not as stressful.
I get you. Yeah, we got our game down now.
Yeah. But I learned the stress reaction to that situation. That's not on still, is it?
No. Okay, dogs, what do you think? From 125 gallons of sap, I believe, 29 bottles of product. These are 8-ounce bottles. I buy these banjo style 8-ounce bottles because they show the beautiful product, and they also are skinny, so they makes it look like there's more in the bottle. So 8-ounce bottles, 16 of them make a gallon. I got 29 bottles and almost 2 gallons. So we'll see if we get a little more later in the year. And then we're going to put our fun labels on.